The pen was in Elvis's hand. The photograph was on the table. But when he looked into the elderly woman's eyes, something made him set the pen down and walk away without signing a single word. Las Vegas, Nevada, July 31st, 1975. The International Hotel. Elvis had just finished the final show of his summer residency, and as always, a small group of VIP fans had been granted access to meet him backstage. These were the people who had won radio contests, purchased expensive meet-and-greet packages, or had connections that opened doors most fans could never walk through. Elvis loved these moments. After the adrenaline of performing for thousands of strangers, meeting individual fans reminded him why he had fallen in love with music in the first place. These were the people who had supported him through controversies, career changes, and personal struggles. Signing autographs wasn't just a courtesy, it was a sacred responsibility. In 15 years of post-Army fame, Elvis had never refused to sign an autograph for a genuine fan, not once. He had signed napkins while eating dinner, hospital gowns while visiting sick children, and cast bandages for fans injured while trying to get closer to him at concerts. He had signed autographs while exhausted, while sick, while dealing with personal crises that would have made most people want to hide from the world. The act of connecting with fans through his signature was something Elvis treated as seriously as any song he ever recorded, which made what happened that night in July 1975 so extraordinary. The meet and greet was proceeding normally. Elvis had signed photographs, album covers, and personal items for about 30 fans when his assistant Joe Esposito approached with the final visitor of the evening. "Elvis, this is Mrs. Eleanor Morrison. She's been a fan since the beginning, and she's traveled here from Atlanta just to meet you." Elvis looked up to see a woman in her early 70s, impeccably dressed, carrying herself with the dignity that comes from a lifetime of overcoming challenges. She was holding a professional photograph of Elvis from his 1968 comeback special, and her hands trembled slightly, not from nervousness but from age and what appeared to be early-stage arthritis. "Mrs. Morrison," Elvis said, standing up with the courtesy his mother had drilled into him. "It's a pleasure to meet you, ma'am. Joe tells me you came all the way from Atlanta." "Yes, Mr. Presley. I've been following your career since I first heard you on the radio in 1954. You've brought so much joy to my life, especially during some very difficult times." Elvis smiled, reaching for his pen. "Well, I'm honored to have fans like you, Mrs. Morrison. What would you like me to write on this photograph?" Mrs. Morrison's response changed everything. "I was hoping you could sign it to my grandson, Tommy. He's serving in Vietnam, and your music is the only thing that helps him get through each day over there." Elvis's pen hovered over the photograph, but he didn't begin writing. Instead, he looked more carefully at Mrs. Morrison, studying her face with the attention he usually reserved for learning new songs. "Your grandson is in Vietnam?" "Yes, sir. He's been there for 8 months. Infantry. He writes to me every week, and he always mentions how much your music means to him and the other boys. They play your records in the barracks, sing your songs while they're marching. He says you help them remember what they're fighting for." Elvis set the pen down on the table. "Mrs. Morrison, can I ask you something? What's your grandson's full name?" "Thomas Morrison. Tommy. He's 20 years old, from a little town outside Atlanta. He enlisted right after high school because he believed it was his duty to serve his country." Elvis was quiet for nearly 30 seconds, his expression growing more serious with each passing moment. Joe Esposito watched nervously, unsure what was happening but sensing that this wasn't a normal autograph signing. "Mrs. Morrison," Elvis said finally, "I need to tell you something and I hope you'll understand. I can't sign this photograph." The room fell silent. Mrs. Morrison's face showed confusion and hurt, but she maintained her dignity. I'm sorry, Mr. Presley. Did I say something wrong?" "No, ma'am, you didn't say anything wrong. But I can't sign a photograph for your grandson because what he needs is much more important than my autograph." Elvis stood up and walked to a small desk in the corner of the room. He pulled out a piece of International Hotel stationery and began writing by hand, his usual quick signature replaced by careful, deliberate letters. Mrs. Morrison and the others watched in confusion as Elvis spent nearly 10 minutes writing what appeared to be a letter. When he finished, he folded the paper carefully and handed it to Mrs. Morrison, along with the unsigned photograph. "Mrs. Morrison, I want you to send this letter to Tommy along with that picture. Don't read the letter yourself, it's meant for him. But I want you to know that your grandson is a hero, and heroes deserve more than autographs. They deserve our respect, our prayers, and our promise that we'll never forget their sacrifice." Mrs. Morrison took the letter with hands that were now trembling for entirely different reasons. "Mr. Presley, "I don't understand. Why won't you sign the photograph?" Elvis's response revealed something about his character that even his closest friends had never fully understood. "Because, Mrs. Morrison, your grandson isn't fighting for Elvis Presley's autograph. He's fighting for something bigger than any entertainer or celebrity. If I sign that picture, it becomes about me. But that letter is about him, about what he's doing for our country, about why what he's doing matters." Elvis paused, his voice growing quieter but more intense. "When Tommy comes home from Vietnam, he's going to need to know that people understand the difference between entertainment and sacrifice. My signature on a photograph suggests that somehow my career is connected to his service, and it's not. What he's doing is sacred. What I do is just what I do." The room remained silent as Mrs. Morrison processed what Elvis had told her. Finally, she spoke. "Mr. Presley, may I ask what you wrote in the letter?" "You can ask Tommy when he gets home, ma'am. But I will tell you this. I wrote to him as one man to another, not as Elvis Presley to a fan. I told him things I wished someone had told me when I was serving in the army. Things about courage and duty and coming home changed but not broken." What Mrs. Morrison didn't know was that Elvis's refusal to sign the photograph was rooted in his own complicated relationship with his military service and the Vietnam War. Elvis had served in the Army from 1958 to 1960, but his experience was vastly different from that of combat soldiers like Tommy Morrison. Elvis had been stationed in Germany, where his celebrity status made him both a target for media attention and a symbol of American culture abroad. While his service had been honorable, Elvis was acutely aware that he had never faced the dangers, fears, and moral complexities that combat soldiers confronted daily. The difference between his relatively safe military experience and the reality facing young men in Vietnam created a sense of guilt that he rarely discussed publicly. In private moments, Elvis often expressed frustration that his fame prevented him from serving in Vietnam when the war began. Colonel Parker and military officials had determined that Elvis's presence in a combat zone would create too many security risks and logistical complications. "I should be over there with those boys," Elvis had said to Priscilla on more than one occasion. "Instead, I'm here singing songs while they're dying for our country." That guilt informed his response to Mrs. Morrison. In refusing to sign the photograph, Elvis was acknowledging that there were experiences and sacrifices that transcended entertainment, that demanded a different kind of respect. The letter Elvis wrote to Tommy Morrison would remain private until 1993, when Tommy, by then a grandfather himself, decided to share its contents during a Veterans Day ceremony in Atlanta. According to Tommy's recollection, the letter read, "Dear Tommy, your grandmother tells me you're serving in Vietnam and that my music helps you and your fellow soldiers get through difficult times. I'm honored by that, but I want you to know something important. You are the real hero in this situation, not me. I sing songs for people who are safe and comfortable. You're putting your life on the line for principles and freedoms that most of us take for granted. When I served in the Army, I was never in real danger. I wore the uniform. I followed orders. I did my duty, but I never faced what you face every day. You're experiencing things that will change you forever, seeing things that will stay with you long after you come home. I want you to know that there are millions of Americans who understand the difference between entertainment and sacrifice. Your service matters in ways that my music never could. When you get home, and you will get home, remember that you've done something that required real courage. You've served something larger than yourself during one of the most difficult times in our country's history. Your grandmother is proud of you. Your country is proud of you. And I am honored to know that someone like you listens to my music. Stay strong, stay safe, and come home to the people who love you. With respect and gratitude, Elvis Presley. P.S. When you get back, if you ever want to talk to someone who's worn the uniform even briefly, I'd be honored to listen. Tommy Morrison returned from Vietnam in December 1975, carrying physical and emotional scars that would take years to heal. But he also carried Elvis's letter, which he read hundreds of times during his recovery. Years later, Tommy would say that Elvis's refusal to sign the photograph taught him something crucial about the difference between fame and honor, between celebrity and character. He could have signed that picture and made my grandmother happy, Tommy reflected. Instead, he chose to treat my service with the seriousness it deserved. That meant more to me than any autograph ever could have. The story of Elvis's refusal spread slowly through veteran communities, becoming part of the folklore that surrounded his relationship with military service. It reinforced his reputation as someone who understood the weight of sacrifice, who refused to trivialize experiences that demanded reverence. Mrs. Morrison returned to Atlanta with the unsigned photograph and the sealed letter, confused but trusting that Elvis had acted with good intentions. When Tommy read the letter upon his return, he called his grandmother immediately. "Grandmother, that man you met in Las Vegas, he's not just an entertainer. He's someone who understands what really matters." Tommy kept Elvis's letter for the rest of his life, framing it alongside his military decorations. He often said that it helped him process his Vietnam experience, that Elvis's acknowledgement of his service provided a kind of validation that no medal or official recognition could match. The incident became one of the defining examples of Elvis's character during his Las Vegas years, a period often criticized for its commercial excess and artistic compromise. But those who knew Elvis well understood that his core values, respect for sacrifice, recognition of duty, understanding of genuine heroism, remained constant throughout his career. Joe Esposito later said that the Tommy Morrison letter was one of the moments that reminded him why he had chosen to work for Elvis. Elvis could have signed that photograph, taken the picture with the grandmother, and moved on to the next fan. Instead, he spent 10 minutes writing a personal letter to a soldier he'd never met, because he understood that some things are more important than keeping fans happy. That's why he was more than just an entertainer. The refusal to sign Tommy Morrison's photograph became part of Elvis's legacy, evidence that fame hadn't disconnected him from understanding what truly mattered. It showed that even at the height of his Vegas success, Elvis maintained a moral compass that pointed toward honor, sacrifice, and the recognition of real heroism. In a career filled with millions of autographs, photographs, and fan interactions, the one time Elvis said no became the moment that revealed the most about who he really was beneath the rhinestone jumpsuits and stage lights. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do for someone is refuse to give them what they think they want, and instead give them what they actually need: recognition, respect, and the understanding that their sacrifice matters more than any celebrity's signature. Tommy Morrison died in 2018, but his family still has Elvis's letter, still treasures the moment when a famous entertainer chose to honor a young soldier's service rather than simply acknowledge his fandom. The unsigned photograph sits beside the letter in its frame, a reminder that sometimes the most meaningful gestures are the ones that refuse to diminish sacred experiences by treating them as routine celebrity encounters. Elvis's refusal to sign that autograph wasn't a rejection. It was recognition of something more important than fame, more lasting than entertainment, more valuable than any signature could ever be,